Necrobusters. Napalm Death is, it gets called a political band.
Salvation of what I see in others.
When you go camping, you get to see the Milky Way galaxy.
Punk rock type attitude too. We're just going to try to, gross you out with our music.
Yo, what's up? This is John from Noise Dosage Media, bringing you some of the most innovative and unique extreme metal musicians on air to have an in-depth conversation about things you probably didn't know until now. Before we unravel this episode, we want to bring attention to our driving force of visual creativity. Begrudgingly Benny creates one-of-a-kind creatures that you can't find anywhere else but below. His focus is on old school style, slimy stippling that is budget friendly for all bands or tattoo desires. Stay updated on the sludge by following at begrudgingly_Benny on Instagram. Wither Designs raises the dead with pen and ink and gives them new life with acidic color. Withered is eager to accompany your next album, merchandise, or zine with new kick-ass necromantic artwork. Keep up with the Horde by following him at withered_designs on Instagram. Thanks for tuning in, and let's dive into this. What is like an album that has changed your life?
Starting in the earliest days, I would say Love Gun from Kiss.
Okay.
And then Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood. Those two were pretty life-changing when I was about 15, 16.
Gotcha. So was there anything in specific with the Kiss stuff? Was it the imagery or the music itself, or?
Well, just being that age and being exposed to, the blood and the fire and at that time, what was heavy music.
Yeah. How many?
I was assuming,
yeah, I've seen them twice, and they blew me away. They had they had zip lines and stuff.
Right. I mean, now I can understand why people don't like them, and there's a lot of, they get made fun of or whatever. But when you're, 7 years old, and seeing that for the first time, and that's kind of your exposure to music, and, compared to everybody else, I mean, just was pretty mind blowing, and
right.
I fell in that got me into music, literally. I knew what I wanted to do from then on.
Right on. So where did that introduction start? Was it like your parents?
A neighborhood kid.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a little older than me and was listening to that stuff already. Been exposed to it.
Right on.
And, it wasn't long after that I pretty much, graduated at Judas Priest, Black Sabbath. We were getting into Cheap Trick, Ted Nugent, that kind of just what was going on at the time,
Right. Yeah, Kiss. It's funny you say Kiss because I was kind of the same way. I got pushed more into obviously the generic stuff like Metallica, Megadeth, and then Kiss was one of them. I got a record, and yeah. I remember seeing the cover and just being blown away. What the hell is this?
Right.
And I thought it was so heavy.
That was before Metallica and Megadeth. So you really there just wasn't much else in that realm. I mean, Black Sabbath was going already and they were pretty scary, I guess. But, just as far as me being 7 years old and being what I was exposed to, it was, Kiss and that whole thing, the fire breathing, the blood spitting, my great grandmother bought me a live one for
wow. Okay. Right on. So yeah, that's funny you say that. My great grandmother absolutely despises Ozzy. She thinks he's the root of all evil. So right. That's cool for you that she got you that. Right on. So I've been asking these, so I'm in the process of doing a documentary, and these are some of the questions. As for the evolution of underground extreme music, what excites you the most about just the evolution of this genre, as a whole?
I guess just as far as branching out into places that haven't been exposed to it, and going in 98 when we went to Bogota, Colombia, that was totally unexplored territory as far as metal.
Uh-huh.
I think like Napalm Death and Incantation were the only bands that had been there before us.
Right.
There might have been a few others, but it wasn't many. And like Dio, Metallica, those bands never went there. It was like too dangerous for them, or I don't even know what it was, whether they were just, in there, like they weren't exposed to it, or for whatever reason, it was an untapped market, and just going there and like seeing the fans and them being so hungry for the metal, just was an eye opener. And those are the kind of shows that I like. And that's kind of like, a main inspiration for doing this, basically.
Right. Getting out of the freaking United States.
Going off to those faraway places that aren't exposed to the metal, like.
Yeah. I feel like seeing that there's like a scene out there, you know what I mean? I feel like that would be so like the two things I would say is having somebody get a tattoo of like a band, like your logo on me. That would be something crazy. And like you said, going out there and then seeing people out loving this style of music like miles and miles away.
Even like playing Mexico in '93 with Overkill, like people were just like killing each other just to get closer to the stage. They were like, just fighting to get up front, and then like the energy and the passion of those fans was insane.
Right.
When we were relatively unknown at that point. I mean, we had Imperial Doom out, but in America, it just wasn't the same, and so to go down there and play those kind of shows, this huge bull ring with, packed full of people, and it was crazy.
Right. So, you've accomplished so much with the bands you've been in. I'm kind of curious as to like, other than obviously traveling to new cities, like you're just talking about, like what is something that you haven't accomplished yet that you're like pushing towards?
As far as places to go, I would say Australia is the only place that I really want to go that I haven't been yet.
Well, I mean, like,
as far as like
what hasn't like your band done that you're pushing for?
Well, there's lots of tours that I wish we could be on, of course. But there's nothing I'm too crazy, like that I'm dying to do totally.
Mm-hmm.
I've pretty much accomplished some, things that like were just thoughts in my head that oh, that would be cool to do this one day, and then all of a sudden for instance, the Obituary thing, the fact that I played drums and guitar in Obituary at one, like doing some touring with them. In 2012 we went down to Brazil and I played second guitar for Obituary. That's cool. It's like
I can't wait. They're coming to Rochester.
Guys are so cool, love those guys. And it's just it was just something in my head where I thought, one day that, wow, it'd be fun to play that stuff, and then sure enough, and just life turns around and goes through its motions, and that ends up happening,
Yeah.
And it's another thing, like even the Terrorizer thing, same thing, I was playing that album World Downfall in '94,
Mm-hmm.
and to have, again, life turn around and, go through the motions. And so one day I end up playing with Pete, Terrorizer, it's just where, I'm a drummer, you know what I mean?
Right. Brand, I think the coolest thing about you, man, you're like multifaceted. Like you got guitar going on, you got drums. I mean,
it started out of necessity. It was a fact, where I was going to high school it was down south of Tampa and it was north of Miami. So there was no one else into playing music like I was into, doing. So I kind of had to do it myself. I was doing demos on my own and, coming up with my own music, writing my own, I had to write lyrics. I had to play guitar because I didn't have a guitar player that was, steady and solid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So would you say when you started this music, were you short drummers or guitar players? Because nowadays there's so many freaking guitar players and there's like no drummers, at least near me in Buffalo.
Right. Well, I kind of, I guess I was officially a drummer first, you know.
Uh-huh.
Even I did try to play guitar first, but where I got, you know, excelled at was the drums first. And it was kind of, you know, a couple years later, then I started, you know, I went out and bought a guitar and an amp and started playing more and more just because, like I said, out of necessity.
Yeah. What was your
But
first ever guitar, man?
Kramer Striker,
Nice. Nice.
yeah,
Kramers are sweet.
yeah. And came up to, it was a place called Thoroughbred Music, and,
Okay.
kind of the music store around here at the time.
You still have it?
No, no, I'm
Damn.
good with it.
Damn.
Yeah, and I sold the amp in Lauderdale in probably 1989. I was in Malevolent.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, remember what happened? It's a good question.
I what's the funniest, like I always ask that because I have a friend, uh Doug White. He's a big guy around here locally in a studio, and he sold, well, he actually had his childhood guitar stolen from him, and he found it in California all the way across the country like 25 years later and bought it back, man.
Wow.
It it's crazy. Like
Yeah,
I don't know, the childhood guitars, I have them and I don't know. I just can't sell them. I can't
right.
do it.
That's how my first drum set. It's a little 5-piece Slingerland.
Okay. All right. So let's hit you with another topic. You know, where do you feel the main similarities and differences are between like the community of underground extreme music versus like, I don't know, like punk or country or all that?
Um, I don't know. I'd say when we first started, there was definitely more of a separation because it was just truly underground, and uh, it was kind of like there was a division. You know, blast beats weren't really widely accepted, and
Mm-hmm.
you could see the division. Like Slayer was like fast and heavy, whereas now Slayer's not even, you know,
Right.
as far as the mainstream, they're just, you know, it's not, you know, now it's common for people to hear blast beats and things like that, you know, whereas back then it just wasn't. um I don't know, you know, like I think with the internet and people getting, you know, it's easier for people to get exposed to heavy music. um it's like almost like I knew our fans by name back in the 90s, you know, like
Now
uh
there's just so many.
now there's so many, you know, it trips me out when we, you know, I go on, you know, you see something on the internet, Facebook, or a comment on YouTube, and it's like a name that I just have no, you know, it's like, oh, I love Monstrosity, they're great, you know, and it's just cool to me that, you know, wow, people that I don't even know are listening to my music, you know. Where it used to be, you know, okay, I got a letter from that guy, I recognize that name, or, you know,
Yeah,
I'll be in
yeah.
Nashville, Tennessee, and like, you know, Lincoln Archibald, you know, it's like, oh, I recognize that name, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and so where you meet people that you've written to, or you've just seen that, you know, like you kind of know the people in the scene just because it wasn't that big back then, you know, it's like
Right.
smaller community.
So
Um,
I'm 22 years old and I just made like a zine, right? And you know, I was never into those. I mean, like, I don't know. To put it short, you know, I didn't know that zines were still a thing right now. And that's a whole different community in and of itself. Like I got like 15 trades, and I'm like, people are still doing this. Like there's this a drive in this genre, and it's still it's growing, and people aren't letting like print die.
right.
So
Good. I think there'll always be some of it to a certain degree, just because people like to, you know,
then
people like to pick up a magazine and read it, or pick up something, and you know, and um, uh, like the Voices from the Dark Side. Are you familiar with that one?
no, not that one.
Well, check it out sometime, man. It was like back in the day, like, you know, you'd get that that fanzine, and you could just pour through it. And I mean, there were just so many bands that you never heard of, and it was so cool to like, it was just jam packed full of bands you'd never heard of, or like obviously some that you had, but it was just a you know, killer exposure to like you know, new bands basically that you hadn't heard of. And you know, we used to, you know, back then we were doing mail and underground fan, you know, tape trading and that kind of thing. So you know, I remember getting the At the Gates demo, you know, back in the
Oh
day.
man, At the
Yeah,
Gates, one of my favorites right now.
right. They barely, you know, they didn't even have the first album yet. You know, it was just a demo, and like writing with them, hey, what's up? What's going on over there? How you doing?
Another huge. They're
Yeah.
huge.
And well, we could, you know, you could hear it then, you know, it's like these guys are talented. They stood out, you know, you could tell it. Same with Opeth, you know, I had that demo pretty early, you know, it was like, wow, these guys are pretty good. You could just hear that they were, you know, a little bit better than the rest, you know. And then you know, of course you'd get like 20 demos that you throw in the trash because they're just horrible. But
Yeah.
sometimes there was cool stuff about even that stuff, you know, that like even the bad bands, you'd find something good in them, you know.
Right.
Is there any
Is there any tapes that you wish you had, like that you got rid of?
I got rid of a lot of them. Yeah, I
Okay.
did. But I still have a bunch too, though. I have like bags and bags and bags, like CDs, mail that I've collected over the years. And I know somewhere I've been trying to think of where it is, but I know I've collected, like I still have all the old mail, like, you know, we used to write with Old Funeral, which was, you know, Abbott before Immortal, you know, like,
Yeah.
I got letters from them somewhere. I know I've
That's
still,
sweet. That's sweet. I've talked to the new bassist, Mia.
right.
She's really cool. She's really laid back. They need to come to the States soon because I've yet to see them.
Right.
But
But yeah, you know, just doing all that, you know, the tape trading, you know, we used to go to the mailbox or the post office with just bag, like these brown paper bags full, you know, full of cassettes. We'd mail off to all kinds, you know, all over the world.
right
So,
on. Yeah.
um,
I
and
I don't see country doing that or
yeah,
disco
exactly.
or
It's rock music, you know, like that's why there's like radio bands to me, or whatever the so-called active rock bands that, you know, they kind of came out. Let me think, you know, not to single anyone out, like a band like Saving Abel or you know, Puddle Mud's a little bigger, but
right.
bands kind of that nature where like, you know, they
Radio
get
friendly for sure.
right, they come out and they, you know, they get pumped on a major label, and you know, they do their you know, their one or two albums, and then they go by the wayside, and then they, you know, they're struggling, you know, drawing the same amount of people we would, you know what I mean, just because they didn't do that underground tape trading and like really.
But the thing is, like, I think it's more consistency. It doesn't matter. You see these bands that do, you know, the two albums, the one hit wonders, and then they just slowly die out. But I don't know, like when it comes to death metal and stuff, it's just consistent, man. Like there's always people there, you know, like it
So,
doesn't
you know,
matter.
we built a fan base by sending out all that mail and, you know, keeping the correspondence and like, you know, all right, we're doing this next, we're doing that, you know, and just being, like you said, the consistency of, you know, never going away, basically. Even though we take forever between albums, we never go away.
Right.
Um, you know, we're playing shows or we're doing something, you know.
All right. So I'm gonna hit you with two more. You know, this is a good one that kind of ties into it. You know, how is this music made like a significant positive impact on your life today?
Pretty much is my life, you know. I mean, uh, mostly everything revolves around it, you know, everything that I do, whether it's, you know, graphics, doing video, recording, obviously playing the guitar, drums, bass, keyboards, learning stuff about that, you know, learning gear, uh, you know, basically I'm consumed with it
Yeah.
or I try to be 20, like I've been getting into flying lately, I've been trying to get my pilot's license going for a little while.
Flying. Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
That that's different, that's something that's not music related that I've been doing lately. But
Do you
that's
think
pretty
there's any similarities between playing like a huge show and hopping in a helicopter?
well. As far as like, when you're
Like
flying,
adrenaline,
there's a
maybe?
saying in flying called keeping ahead of the airplane. And it's an analogy I can use in the music where you're like keep ahead of the music, you know what I mean? Know what's coming next, and so you don't drop your parts, like,
Oh yeah.
and it's just something like that, I would, but otherwise, not really,
That's awesome. I haven't heard that. I mean, other than freaking Iron Maiden. Uh, that that is sweet.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely fun.
the last thing I will hit you with is we're talking a little bit more back in the day. What did you feel like was the most rewarding part about doing things DIY with all of your projects?
Well, it was harder because, we didn't have like the help of, even in a major underground label. We were doing it ourselves as far as, getting the word out originally. And then, um, I was in Malevolent Creation in '89, and we had kind of we did the demo and sent it out through the mail, and doing that kind of thing. We were just kind of like getting into that stuff. And I was right at the point of, doing the record deal with Roadrunner when I left that band. So I was kind of like right there. So when Monstrosity got together, I kind of knew the steps to take to get Monstrosity to that point. So, within, I'd say 6 or 7 months of recording, or not even, just of forming the band, we had a record deal. So things moved pretty quick as far as that goes. Um, so, but at the same time, there was just so many bands that we were competing with, on the record label, that it was kind of hard to stand out. And, after that, things took more of like, I would say, went back to like a DIY approach, whereas, I was doing my own label and keeping ownership of the masters and things like that. A lot of
Yeah.
the bands, a lot of those early bands, they signed, a 9 year or a 9 album record deal, and they own the, it's basically like a bank where they get the money to record the album, but they don't own the album. The record label owns the album forever, and
Yeah,
it
take
never,
everything.
there's friends of mine that, they can't release their first albums because, they don't own them and they have no control over them. Whereas luckily, um, I have control over all of our, the Monstrosity album. So that's, one thing. It's a little bit of a setback because, when they own it, they tend to, milk it more.
Oh yeah. I could just imagine like Napalm Scum. It's still making money today.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, if
For
they
sure.
didn't have I'm assuming they have the rights to that album, but if they didn't, wow.
I bet I wouldn't be surprised if, Earache still has those rights,
Yeah. Damn.
because that's how the record deals were back, especially back then, and it was probably even worse in the '70s because it was like there weren't like the underground labels, I will call them a major underground labels. They weren't there, it was either major label or nothing. So
Mhm.
it was a hard to get through the door, a lot harder. Whereas
Right.
once in like in the '80s, once the underground label thing started to happen, there were a lot more bands that were getting exposed and getting signed and things like that. And then in the '90s, it became like everybody had a label and a band,
Yeah. Yeah.
it became like, and now there's the internet, so everybody's got their 10 minutes of fame, so.